The one exception to this is Boston cream donuts, because you can't have that in a mini donut form, and they are absolutely delicious and should never be minimized in any way.
Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a weekly podcast for book lovers by book lovers. Build your to-be-read list with Sadie, Liz, Virginia, Fiona, and Corrine from the Port Moody Public Library. Warning, this podcast contains strong opinions and may cause an increase in your library holds list.
Welcome to another episode of Keep It Fictional with the Port Moody Public Library. I'm Virginia, here with my book friends Corrine, Sadie, and Emma. It's March already. I can't believe it's March. It's like not that long ago. I thought we're just still saying like Happy New Year. Like, I don't know what happened. But every March, I make my book friends celebrate this special literary event with me. March is Small Press Month. And so we are here to celebrate the smaller, the independent publishers, all the people that work there, and all the authors that they work with. Small presses often have more of a focus because they can only publish so many books in a year. So they really specialize, whether it's like they special in a specific place and they want to highlight their local authors, or like they highlight specific genres. They often have like a really, really focused mission. And I think that's what makes small presses really special, because they're vital in making sure that more voices are heard and that there's a variety for all of us readers out there other than just whatever the trends are at the moment. So this is our third year doing this, and there are 4 of us here, so we can only feature 4 small presses. So I recommend you all to go back to those previous episodes that we get to know more small presses. We have talked about Roseway Publishing, Charcoal Press, Kenneth Major, Tin House, Graywolf Press, and also And Other Stories. So we might have some new and maybe one repeat of one repeat publisher this year, but that's okay because they are awesome. So they are worth repeating. So we are going first to Emma and see what small press you have for us. And then I would love to have everybody tell us a little bit about the publisher if you have just a little few facts.
All right. In my defense, this is the first time I've done the Small Press Month episode. So I heard my small press mentioned in Virginia's little intro. So apologies for repeating, but I did check the spreadsheet. No one has talked about my book before. So we are covering hopefully a different topic today. And I picked this press because it is very near and dear to my heart. This press is Graywolf Press, located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I lived for 5 years of my life. And while I was there studying English, I read a lot of books published by Graywolf. A lot of my classes really focused on local authors, local presses. And so I've really enjoyed stuff by Graywolf that I've read in the past, and I really wanted to highlight the work that they do today. So apologies if you guys have heard about Graywolf before, but they are a nonprofit literary publisher of fiction, nonfiction, works in translation, but mostly poetry. They really focus on publishing poetry. And as I said, they're located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the historic Warehouse District, a really kind of beautiful area with a lot of like old industrial brick buildings. I loved hanging out in the Warehouse District, a really cool neighborhood. Graywolf was founded in 1974, and they take a lot of pride in publishing risk-taking, visionary writers who transform culture through literature. Since its inception, Graywolf has become one of the leading nonprofit publishers in the United States. They publish about 30 to 35 books a year, so they're pretty selective with the authors that they use. And they publish from writers at all stages of their careers, from the US, from around the world. So they really try to have a really diverse group of people that they're publishing. While they originated as a publisher of poetry and are still very much dedicated to publishing poetry, they've expanded to fiction and nonfiction as well. Graywolf has published works by multiple poets laureate of the United States, including the current poet laureate Ada Limon, Natasha Trethway, Tracy K. Smith, lots of really kind of acclaimed poets. And some other writers who have published under Graywolf are, and I apologize if I mispronounce any names, are Kaveh Akbar, Elizabeth Alexander, Natalie Diaz, Claudia Rankin, Percival Everett, Max Porter, Dinez Smith, and of course, Carmen Maria Machado, who I have to talk about today. So for today's episode, I read Carmen Maria Machado's debut. It's a collection of short stories called Her Body and Other Parties, This book was published in 2017. And since coming out with this book, Machado has also released a memoir called In the Dream House, which was also published by Graywolf Press in 2019. The only thing by her that I've read up to date is she actually edited the 2019 version of Carmilla that I read for our vampires episode. So that's kind of what I know her more for, but this is my first time diving into one of her solo works. So this book is a collection of short stories. It features 8 short stories that are all kind of blending together the genres of horror, psychological fiction, and speculative fiction. The stories are both otherworldly and deeply connected to real-world experiences that women of all different ages and sexualities face. So in a very quick summary and without any spoilers, this is what each of the stories is about. So there's 8 of them in the whole book. The first one is a woman's husband is obsessed with the mysterious green ribbon that she wears around her neck. And I'll talk more about that one in a bit. Corinne got excited. That one was my personal favorite. The second story I also really liked. It recounts an inventory of a woman's various lovers of all genders kind of throughout her adulthood, while in the background, a deadly epidemic is creeping across America. So if you don't like COVID fiction, I would stay away from that. But this was published before the pandemic, so it's kind of interesting to read it in this like post-pandemic society that we live in now. The third story, in my opinion, made the least amount of sense. In this one, a woman, and I like things that are kind of weird and banana pants, but this one I was like, what? I don't get it. I don't get the plot. But in this one, a woman is given a baby that apparently she gave birth to, despite having no memory of this. And I feel like Virginia would like the story. And then her wife, who's conveniently named Bad, promptly abandons her to raise this child that she has no memory of. Very little details given out throughout this story, so I was just like totally confused from start to finish. The fourth story was my least favorite, but a lot of reviewers online believe that it's a stroke of genius. In this one, Machado rewrites the descriptions of all 272 episodes of Law & Order SVU to include doppelgangers, ghosts, and girls with bells for eyes. So, like, it's good if you like SVU, I'm assuming. I've never seen SVU, so it didn't really work for me. But a lot of people online are like, this is the most genius thing I've ever read in my entire life. People loved it. So that's the entire, it's like a novella, it's long. So that's like the entirety of the fourth story is just each little episode blurb. But it's Machado's, she takes the titles of the episode and writes like her own version of what that episode could be like if it was weirder and more paranormal. So for those of you that like Law & Order SVU, that's the story for you. The fifth one is another one that I really liked. In this one, women all over the world are fading out of existence. And the narrator works at a pop-up prom dress store in a mall. She learns that many of these women have been sewn into the garments that she sells. So that one was creepy. The sixth one discusses fat phobia and a woman's relationship with food and with her body as she considers getting bariatric surgery. And then the seventh one is the longest story. In this one, a writer attends an artist residency in the wilderness, and she kind of slowly reconciles with the fact that she herself might be the mad woman in the attic. The last story shows a woman's attempt to deal with the aftermath of a sexual assault by watching pornography. So many of these stories kind of come with a content warning. There's fat phobia, there's sexual assault. There's a lot of different kind of mental illness stuff that's discussed throughout of it. But each of them really leans into the realities of these women's lives and specifically the violence that's committed to their bodies. Like I said, the first one was my favorite. That one was called The Husband Stitch. And that story was a retelling of the urban legend, The Girl with the Green Ribbon, a story that I know the best from Alvin Schwartz's In a Dark, Dark Room, which terrified me as a child. We had the book kind of sitting on the bookshelf across from my bed growing up, and I remember just like not being able to go to sleep if I could see the cover. It was but I loved it. I loved the story so much, but it was also very, very creepy. So in this version of the story, all women wear ribbons of different colors that are all kind of on different places of their bodies. And the narrator obviously has a green ribbon around her neck. Early in the story, the narrator meets her future husband at a party as a teen. The two of them fall in love, and they very freely explore each other's sexual desires. They have a lot of sex in public, and she like very frequently has to tell him that he can't touch her ribbon. And like while they're having sex, he oftentimes wants to touch it. It's like it's something that arouses him. It's a little bit weird, but that's a boundary that she has to set. You cannot touch my ribbon, and she won't explain to him why. So he gets increasingly more curious with it. He wants to touch it. He becomes obsessed with the ribbon. And the narrator really tries to kind of be clear about her boundaries, be really firm with him, but he still tries to touch it and untie it at any chance that he gets. This problem only worsens when she gives birth to their son in the future, who also becomes increasingly curious about the ribbon. And the narrator tries to sort of counteract this. She tries to kind of raise her son to be a better man by telling him urban legends that are told from the female perspective. So throughout the whole story, you get little bits of urban legends, of different myths, and they're all very like female focused. But as the son gets older, he becomes less interested in these stories and kind of gradually grows apart from his family. Soon it becomes harder and harder for the narrator to keep her husband away from touching her ribbon. As he gets older, he becomes just more and more obsessed with it. It arouses him. It's kind of weird. And then eventually she gives in. She tells him, okay, you can untie the ribbon. This gets him super hot. It's kind of weird until eventually he unties the ribbon. And if you know the original story, then you know how it ends. I don't want to spoil it in case anyone here doesn't know the original Green Ribbon story. But as someone who grew up with that story, like I really, really liked Machado's version in here. Some of the main themes in this story specifically, but in the collection as a whole, are sexual desire. Female desire is almost always kind of second to male desire, even at the end of that first story. The narrator prioritizes her husband's needs, and it causes something bad to happen to her. I won't spoil what happens. And the narrator's experience towards the end of the story kind of show the self-sacrifice that women often have to make in these male-dominated societies. The narrator puts her own life at risk for the sake of satisfying her husband sexually. So my favorite stories in the collection were this one and the one where women were fading, called Real Women Have Bodies. That one was very like ethereal and creepy. And there's this sense of urgency that the narrator feels as her girlfriend slowly becomes one of these fading women. That actually really reminded me of one of my favorite books, Our Wives Under the Sea, where a woman is like very, very, as someone's partner is very, very slowly becoming something otherworldly, kind of disappearing from the world that they knew, from the world that they shared together. As a whole, this collection had some parts that I really enjoyed. It definitely had some duds. I did not like the SVU one. There are a couple other ones that just didn't really connect with me. But if you like queer horror, if you like paranormal or psychological fiction, if you like Julia Armfield, who wrote Our Wives Under the Sea, Mona Awad, Bora Chung, one of the read-alikes to this I saw online was Cursed Bunny, or other just like weird feminist sci-fi horror, stuff like that, then I would really recommend you check out Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado, published by Graywolf.
Thank you, Emma, for bringing Graywolf Press again to the show. I mean, you have a much more personal connection with it, so that's great. Better than like me talking about it, for sure. And that collection sounds amazing. I've always wanted to read her books and just never got around to it. But I think, you've definitely pushed that up on my list. Yeah, even if I don't care about Law and Order, I think that just sounds amazing. I've never watched Law and Order. I don't care about it, never want to watch it, but that just sounds amazing. So thank you for bringing those to the show. All right, so I'm going to go next with my publisher. So I am going to highlight this year Archipelago Books. This is an American publisher founded in 2003. They're based in Brooklyn. And in their website, they talk about how they want to promote cross-cultural exchange through international literature in translation. They do new and classics books. And they talk about also very much interested in establishing more like a relationship with their authors or with their translators and with their readers. So very often before they publish a book, when they got like a manuscript, they're kind of thinking like, well, can I work with this person and develop a relationship? They're not just interested in this one-time publication. They want to know that they can like engage with them longer. And so a lot of repeat authors, if you look at the catalog, last week when I talked about Scholastic Mukasonga, she's one of the authors that they have multiple books that have been published by them. And you can see this commitment commitment to not just people, but also translation on their website. Because when you go to look at all the books, you can filter them by authors, but also by translator, which is not something you find very easily. But again, because they are really looking into establishing those relationships with translators. So really giving them prominence and recognizing the importance that they have in bringing those works to us. And speaking of their website, you can also look at them by languages. Going to be super helpful when I'm trying to fill my 25 languages for the year. And I think they would probably not disagree with me when I say that they have probably a lot of the more common languages books featured and translated, but they are also making a big effort into branching out. The latest book that they just published in February is in their first Indonesian book in translation. So that's very excited to see sort of the variety that they have, and they're really trying to bring the world to us. My first book from this press is about 2 years ago when I read The Practical Guide to Levitation by Jose Eduardo Agualusa, who is a Portuguese author and is translated by Daniel Han. It's a short story collection, and I still think about that one story where we have Jorge Luis Borges, who is stuck in a plantation of banana trees because people mistaken him as like Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So he's stuck in this like wrong setting. And that's like just the way his stories are, like, it's super funny. And I remember like just as a really great introduction offer that I have not read before, but also to this publisher. And I started looking more into what they've got. And their books are very distinct. I got 2 of them with me today, not the one that I'm going to talk about, but they're like these like nice kind of squarish kind of size. And I find them like really great in my hands. Like, I have one at home right now that I'm reading that's about like 500 pages, but they feel really like, even 500 pages, it just feels like it fits in your hand, not like the big chunky books. I also really like their cover design. Is usually like just a very tasteful photo or like some sort of like art on there. And the other thing is like, you got to feel these books because there's got this like textured cover. And again, it just feels nice in your hand. So I feel like they do a lot of care in everything that's related to the reading experience. So took advantage of the week's topic, the long weekend, catch up on some of the books that they have published. I read a few of them, one Spanish, 2 French, and 1 Kashmiri, which I've never read before. So again, thanks to them, I was able to read something original in a language that I have not encountered yet. I was going to cheat and tell you about all of them, but I won't. I'm going to focus on one book. So the book that I end up choosing, it is called Great Fear on the Mountain. And Corinne is going to laugh at my French pronunciation. So I'm like, should I even attempt to do this? And on YouTube, there's only videos in French. So I'm like pausing it to try to listen to how they pronounce it. So Corinne, you can correct me. Charles Ferdinand Ramuz.
Just say it with more of like an attitude and then you're there.
Yeah, which I don't have. Anyway, so that's, I'm not going to say the author's name again until the end of the show. And it's translated from French by Bill Johnston. Really, so far this year, there's a lot of French books in my list. I don't know why. Anyway, I choose to highlight this one because I feel like it's been a while since I talk horror or maybe horror adjacent. And this book, I think some people might consider horror. Some people might consider like literary fiction with horror elements in it, I guess, maybe. But they're all the horror elements that I really, really enjoy and prefer. And one being that you never see the quote unquote monster in question. Like whatever that's lurking in the corner, whatever that's hiding in your bed, whatever that's chasing you, you don't see. So you're experiencing that fear through the fear of the characters. And I love that way more than like just having description of like how horrible the monster looks like in many ways, whatever form this monster is. The other preference that I generally have with my horror is the setting. I love like kind of, I guess, folk horror might be the subgenre of it, where it takes place in like a very small village that are very like isolated from the rest of the world. You know that like they don't really have a lot of contact with others. And because of that, in this very close-knit community, they have developed sort of their own way of life in some ways. So a lot of like traditions, a lot of rituals that they might do, a lot of practices that are maybe questionable that they kind of believe in, that sort of drives everybody's behavior, and that has carried on for generations. And so I love sort of that kind of setting. And this book has that also. So check a lot of boxes for me. And so our story begins with a council meeting, kind of a town hall meeting, I guess. They just had a vote. There's 58 yes votes versus 33 no votes. And finally, the chairman thought we could finally go ahead with this. It's been years that he has tried to convince the very stubborn people that they need to take every advantage that they can get, because in their Swiss village, feed is getting low. And their village really relies on their livestock as their main way of survival. And all of them know that somewhere up on this mountain, there are acres and acres of perfectly green pastures for grazing. Now, let me just stop also to say that despite reading a book about the topic and seeing these words over and over again, I'm just randomly throwing these terms out because I have no idea about cows and goats and herding and whatever. So I'm just saying these words. Grass equal good. That's all I got out of this. This acre, so much grass that could feed like 70 animals all summers. And so why wouldn't we like go up there and set our animals free? But every time he brings this up with the villagers, they always say no to going up the mountain, because 20 somewhat years ago, something bad happened up there. And the villagers believe that if they go up again, something bad will happen again. But finally, this year, yes vote won. Probably because of the younger generations, the younger folks who don't really believe in these stories anymore. So now the chairman just needs to hire a few people so that they can spend the summer up with those animals, make some cheese, make some butter. Despite the votes, very, very few people are actually willing to take this job. There is they refer to the master and the nephew, like the two people that actually lease the land. There is Joseph, who is looking for more money so that he could get married this fall. He wants to provide for his fiancée. He wants to give her the best life. So he thought this would be a great chance to get some more money. Then there's Roman, who's looking for work. There's 13-year-old Ernest, who kind of got volunteered by his mother to push him towards the chairman. So you need a smaller kid. You need a smaller kid who can get into those places that others can't. So Ernest could go with you. And then there's Bartholomew, which is quite a surprise to everybody because Bartholomew was there 20 years ago. He was there. He knows what happened, but yet he's still willing to go up because he thinks this time he is protected. He has this piece of paper that he worn around his neck. And that's kind of like his personal ward, his personal charm. And it's been like dipped in like holy water 3 times at some special fountain or whatever. So he thinks that that's going to protect him. And that's 6 people, and they just need one more person. And after searching and after asking around, and no one is willing to go up, he finally agreed to give the job to Clau. Clau is this kind of a bit of a suspicious character. No one really trusts him. Nobody really knows what he wants. They might have just a little bit prejudice because, his face is asymmetrical. So sometimes you can't quite tell what he's thinking, can't quite tell what he's feeling. And so people don't trust him. But since no one is willing to go, job went to him. So the 7 people, they went up with all the animals, and the agreement is that they're going to spend 6 months up there for the summer. And then each week, the village will send some provisions and supplies up, and maybe they can exchange some letters, but they don't really get to come down as much. The night that they arrive, it was a very long journey. Going up the mountain was hard. So everybody just sort of sat around the fire for a little bit, and then they just went to bed really early because everybody was tired. When they woke up the next morning, Ernest, the 13-year-old, asked everyone, "Did you hear the footsteps, on the roof?" And everybody looked up from what they're doing. And Bartholomew, who was there 20 years ago, said, "Yup, that's how it got started last time. Footsteps. It started with the footsteps." besides all the things that I talked about earlier, about why I think this is like kind of a perfect horror book for me, one of the things you'll notice right away is the way how the author describe nature and describe the outside. And nature is definitely not just scenery. They're not props. It is really integral to the story. And it just makes everything so like menacing. And like you're always kind of like, is it real? Is it not real? And nature is like kind of concealing the truth from you. And more importantly, is the light and the sound and sometimes the lack of that really builds that tension. I don't know if I ever read a book that I love those repetitions of those descriptions as much. When the author was describing the color changes in the sky, the different levels of light that land on the mountain depending on what the time of the day it is, the depths of shadows that this light produces, again, the different kinds of shadows, and the sounds, the mountain sounds that sound like it's just laughing, or like even just the cows that are gathering around your house sometimes, just the noise that they make. There's just something very, very disturbing about it. And nature is scary, and there are going to be consequences for these people who dare to set foot in it and invade its space. But at the same time, because you hear about these sunrise, sunset, you hear these light coming and going all the time, there's this cyclical nature of the day. And so there's also this like indifference in some ways. Like nature doesn't care about you either. Yes, you can go in there, but like, you know, you're just like these puny humans is no matter to nature in some ways. The other feature of his writing that also I love is how he uses his sudden changes of pronouns to signal a change in perspective. Not just like a story where it's told by different characters or like, you know, that you get different stories. Not quite like that, but more maybe like a movie director who is shifting the camera around abruptly so that suddenly you get the scene from a different view. And it just creates this really like eerie kind of mood to all of this. And it's very, very effective the way he does it. And at several points, suddenly he will like throw in a you. And I'm like, who is you? Is there like an eighth person there? Like, who is this? And it takes you by surprise. And then like later on, you kind of figure out, oh, maybe it's that. They just throw in these changing pronouns, very like, you know, from sentence to sentence. And then you're like, who is talking? Like, who is actually watching this? Is there someone watching all of these people? So it makes it like really, really interesting and really, really kind of unsettling in many ways. This book reminds me a lot of one of my all-time favorite horror novel called The Caretaker of Lawnfield, which I feel like is out of print now, even though it's not like a super old book, and it's by Dave Seltzman. It also features like this kind of village that has a very long-standing tradition that people are starting to question, and they kind of like, we don't have to believe that anymore, and the consequences that comes with that. And so I feel very much like, you know, you get that kind of similar kind of vibe from it. The author is a Swiss author, and he lives in France and Paris for quite a bit. But whenever he writes, he's more famous for bringing the Swiss mountains into his books and making sure that that setting is very, very prominent in his books. He writes a lot about kind of like these small villages. You know, he writes about like sort of more like the rural setting and kind of the country folks kind of like stories. So, you know, like if that appeals to you, if you want to travel to the Swiss mountains, even though it's scary, I would highly recommend this really unsettling read. It is called Great Fear on the Mountain by Charles Ferdinand Ramuz, translated from French by Bill Johnston. All right, let's get to some questions before our next two books from Sadie and Corinne. I have a weird kind of question because I was just kind of thinking about small press, and maybe we could talk about like more small presses, which we tend to do sometimes. But I thought we'll kind of like, when I think about small, I kind of thought, maybe we'll kind of do a little bit of a would you rather kind of questions, or what I guess would you prefer? Maybe there's a better kind of word for it. But something that's to do like something small and something big. What would you prefer? So first one, of course, we're a book podcast, so let's talk about length of novel. Short novel or long novel? And I would like to know, what do you consider a short novel? Because I remember in December at our library, we did a display of short books. And some books that were there, put on there, I'm like, this is not short at all. Like, what are you talking about? So I would love to know, what do you consider a short novel? I think I know Emma's answer.
I prefer short novels. I'll read pretty much anything if it's short. Because like even if I don't like it, it'll be done soon, so I can kind of power through it. But with a long book, like it has to really, really sell me for me to even be willing to try it. And I think so. Like when I say short novels for myself, it's like if it's like plus or minus 200 pages, kind of like near 200, but definitely shorter than that, then that's short. A short book. If it's like 230, I would still call that short. But if I'm putting books on a short books display, I'm thinking no. So like it's different from like what I would consider a short book for myself versus like a display at the library. It has to be a novella. So it can be like if it hits like 170, that's getting a little bit long. Like I think people were putting Before the Coffee Gets Cold on our short books display, and like that book, I would say it's too long for that. I would say when I think short books, I think like Passing by Nella Larson. I think like novella, or like the book I read last week, Cold Nights of Childhood. I think short.
Strong disagree. Before the Coffee Gets Cold is absolutely a short book. Can I do like hand motions, which I'm sure are very useful on a podcast? Honestly, for me, 200 pages is a very short one. It's like if I can, and usually for me, it's like the length of time it takes me to finish it. I would say in terms of preference, I get very suspicious of long books because I'm like, did you really need that many words to like wrap this up? So I do tend to kind of look at them askance because I'm like, is it that you had that much to say or that the plot sustained this, or did you just not have a good editor? So I do tend to go kind of like medium to short. It had to be a really, really good, because again, I'm sitting down and reading it in one go. So if I'm committing to a long book, it better be good because I'll be sitting there for hours.
Or you're Stephen King and they're like, do I want to edit your book? Maybe I'll just leave it. Who am I to do it? Even though I do have to say many of Stephen King books weirdly do need those, like it's okay. Like I think I'll give him a pass for it. Like it does have like, yeah. But I love it when some people would tell me like, oh, I'm like, oh, I gave that book up because it's like, not interesting. And then, oh, just get past the first like 100 pages and then it will get interesting. I'm like, why? Why would I do that? Then you have like a wrong book, like, like Corinne said. Anyway, I like what you said too about time. Maybe like the question is flawed in many ways because I think it's like Before the Coffee Gets Cold, yes, maybe page wise, maybe it over the page limit, but give it as a fast read, then it's still a short book, I guess. So yeah. And it feels like one of those, maybe. I don't know. Sadie?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the page number. I think that around 200 pages, I think of as a short book, or anything under that, I think of as a short book. I'm going to go the opposite. I like a long book. I do, like, not an 800-page book, but my ideal book usually sits around like 400 pages. Just because I feel like it gives me something to kind of sink my teeth into. It actually gives me something to get involved in, which I find, and maybe I'm just not reading the right short books. Maybe I just don't gravitate towards short books, so I don't have a huge breadth of them to draw from. But I just find that with shorter ones, I'm often wanting more, especially if it's a book that I've really liked. I want it to keep going. And I think that with like 350, 400 pages, you can kind of get into things a little bit more. The ones that are over 1,000, I really, really struggle with. Those ones, I just can't quite understand why you would need to write a book that is that long. Split it into two and call it a trilogy instead of a duology. Like it's just, yeah, like the Pillars of the Earth, that one, I would say too long, way too long.
Then give you a Brandon Sanderson, whose each of them is 1,000. It's already a trilogy or whatever it is called. Like it's already 4 books now. Then like how many are you going to split? Anyway, but those are great. I'm okay with those 1,000 pages. I feel like I think I would have said long books also before, because I think just the type of books that, like I tend to read science fiction, fantasy before, but I think now is more short books. But I find that I take quite long with short books also. Like it's still, like it requires like the time. Again, it's like it's just because it's short doesn't mean it's easy to read, I guess. But yeah, and then some of the long ones, like I flew through those 1,000-page Brandon Sanderson Stormlight Archive because they were just so like easy. It's not because it's like simple, but just like just the way he writes, it's very like it just doesn't require the same kind of like, deciphering concentration in some ways. So I think, yeah, especially if you're familiar with the world. So anyway, all right, thank you. A quick one after this long discussion. Mini donuts or regular sized donuts?
This is so easy. Regular sized donuts, mini donuts are disgusting.
Mini donuts, always. Regular sized donuts are, no. There's very few regular. It's easy to get regular sized donuts wrong, I think. Whereas mini donuts all taste like it's similar. So I feel like it's, anyway. Someone else.
I'm Team Virginia. But this is because I don't really love donuts that much. They are not my sweet treat of choice. So like a regular sized donut is too much donut. A mini donut is the perfect amount of donut.
I actually think I'm going to go on the mini donut side as well, even though I eat way too many of them when I get them because they're just so easy. And the one exception to this is Boston cream donuts, because you can't have that in a mini donut form, and they are absolutely delicious and should never be minimized in any way.
Big donuts are more versatile.
But I think there's like a joy that is associated with mini donuts because you imagine going to like P&E to eat them. Like, there's just something like fun about that. And I think that adds to the like, you're at a hockey game and you're like eating mini donuts. Like I think it's because of that it feels better. But I'm like Emma, like I don't love donuts, so
I do think Sadie made a great point because I like a filled donut if it's like a raspberry filling sort of thing. So like on that end, yes, you got to go with a big donut. But if I just have to choose mini or large, I'm going to choose mini.
I also feel like maybe they shouldn't be doing that much with donuts. I waited in line in Portland for a very long time to get a box of subpar donuts, and I just don't think that maybe it's worth it.
Same here. I went to Seattle, went to like the supposedly most, I'm just like, what is this? This is garbage. Like you line up, right? And you're just like, what? Like you must be like, and I think maybe that also like the anticipation also probably doesn't help. But like, it's bad.
Anything could be bad.
Not mini donuts though. Because there's less you can do with it. So that's why you can't really get them wrong as much. I didn't think a donut question. I thought that was going to be a fast one anyway. Maybe not. All right. Next. Unless you have more donut things that you need to get out of you. No? Okay. TV series. Short season, like a 6-episode season, like many of the British TV series? Or do we prefer like one that has like as many episodes as they can fit in so that you can enjoy them for like a whole, I don't know, year?
This is a loaded question because I do enjoy a longer show. Like one of my favorite anime is Bleach, which is like famously too long for a lot of people to invest time into. But Karine and I have had this conversation before where we really appreciate a show that has like a very clear arc from start to finish. Like a show like Avatar: The Last Airbender is the perfect show because they knew exactly what they were going to do from start to finish. They knew exactly how it was going to end. Full Metal Alchemist is another good example of this. And so they didn't waste time getting to that end point. Like they started, they finished. They don't need to create any extra content. We don't need all of these additional avatars that they're coming up with. They had a perfect story that had a perfect ending. I think Ted Lasso is the same way. So like in that regard, I like a short show because I don't want them to ruin it by trying to do too much. But I also love like Bleach and Hunter x Hunter, which famously have way too many episodes.
I would say that I agree with that. And I'm going to kind of go back to Virginia's question and say that I like a short show that has a definite through line and arc, but longer seasons. So I think, Virginia, we're asking, like, do you like short seasons or longer seasons? And I think like a show that has 20 episodes per season, but 4 seasons, great. Because again, same with what Emma said, they know where they're going. They're not wasting a lot of time. I hate shows that you kind of get to the 8th season. You're like, what is the point? Why are you're clearly just doing this because you're trying to continue to make money. And even though there have been shows that I have absolutely loved that have ended, I have at least appreciated that they knew where they were going and that they completed their storyline. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is one of my all-time favorite shows, and it did that. I think it was a 4-season show. And again, like it knew exactly where it was going. I was so sad that it was done, but happy that they kind of actually wrapped up the story and ended it the way they wanted to end it instead of being canceled, which so many shows are.
Yeah, I feel like they don't do like the super long sitcom syndicated Monster of the Week shows in the same way that they used to, just because streaming, I think, absolutely changed the way that the television landscape works. I think because of the genre of shows that I tend to watch, British mysteries, true crime, I like short and sweet. Short and sweet. 3 episodes max. If I am scrolling down that Netflix and there's episode after episode after episode, I'm like, I don't have time for this. And I genuinely do not think you can sustain a story this long.
Yeah, I think same here. Give it sort of like some sort of drama. Like I used to think that I love like just things that never end because if you love a show, you never want it to end. But like after watching like 40 Towers, and I'm just like, wow, like just a good, nice 6 episode. That's all I need. Don't have to do more, And so yeah, I feel like there's definitely short sometimes too. Okay. Okay. Little dogs or little cats, I guess. I don't. Cats are hard to say. Little dogs or big dogs. Little cats or big cats. They are big cats, but just maybe a different kind. So
I'm going to skip over the cat part and just go right to dogs and say big dogs. 100%. I'm a big dog person.
This question doesn't work for cats. Unless it's a kitten. As a resident cat person, I'm going to also skip over the cat bit. And I prefer big dogs. Little dogs are annoying.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Definitely big dogs. Like I love dogs, but little dogs I don't love at all. And Corinne is torn.
This is really tough. I'm actually going to say little dogs because they've got big personalities. Yeah, we had like a little Pomeranian and I love that dog. I love that dog. I love that dog jumping up on my lap. That dog thought it was like 85 feet tall and a wolf. And it was bite-sized. And yeah, they've just got a lot of like, there's very poorly trained little dogs, more so than big dogs, is I think the difference between them. But there's just something about their portability and you can throw them in a bag.
I was going to say, Karina's secretly like a dog purse person, isn't she?
I know, right? But I keep seeing this like person on Instagram that is like she carries her Samoyed in a backpack behind all the time as she walks around. So, like you can also carry big dogs. Also portable. Also portable.
Samoyeds are my favorite dogs.
Well, I'm sure everyone has seen that, like, if it was Facebook or Instagram or something, where it was at the New York subway said that you can only have animals if they fit inside of a bag. And so people started crafting these bags to fit their gigantic dogs inside of.
All right. Last one. If you're going to have dinner, would you rather have a meal that has like a bunch of little like appetizers and stuff? Or would you rather have like a good satisfying main course?
I like dips, so I'm going to go with appetizers. So I can get things with dips. And maybe a dessert or two thrown in there at the end.
I second that. I'm a dip girl. I love a meal of appetizers. I think nowadays they call it girl dinner. But I love like cheese and crackers, chips and hummus. I love a dinner made out of snacks.
Yeah, I would say the same thing too. Yeah, there's just something like fun about just having like when I look at like a bento box, I don't really care about the main thing that we put in there, but I love all the little things that is surrounding it because there's just like all different tastes and all different kinds. It could be sweet, it could be savory, it could be like anything. So yeah.
It kind of reminds me, I was having dinner with some friends who are Korean, and in Korean food, there's like a lot of dishes and a lot of like banchan, like side dishes. And they were kind of watching me and they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you could eat all the things, you don't have to like, because I was focusing on one thing in front of me and then I would finish it and then I would move on to the other thing and then I would finish it. And they're like you take a little bit of this, you take a little bit of this, you mix it up, and you have like all of it at the same time. And I was very much like, no, I am finishing this soup until the last drop. And when the soup is done, I will put it aside and then I will focus on my rice dish. Yeah. So, I'm going to say one thing because I feel like it can be more cohesive if it's just the one thing. And dips, they're so hard to like because you always have that leftover container of hummus in the back of your fridge and it's such a pain to wash when you've forgotten about it. So yeah, I'm going to go one thing.
All right. Well, thank you. Okay, I guess we'll go back to our books and we're going to go to Sadie and see which small independent press she's got for us today.
All right. So I actually discovered my book and my publisher while I was looking for a book for a past episode, for the episode on books that are set in not often talked about countries. And I was looking through a list of books set in African countries, which I didn't end up using. And I saw this one and looked into the publisher a little bit, and it was an independent press, and VPL had a copy. And so I was able to get the book. And so I decided to give it a try. And there are strangely actually two publishers that I'm going to be mentioning today. So Masobe Books is a Nigerian publisher, and it was founded in 2018 with the mission to bring beautiful and exciting stories from talented African authors to your doorstep with ease and on time. Now, they recognize that it is not easy for African authors to get their work into people's hands. Whether they choose to self-publish or go through a more traditional publishing house, authors often have to struggle with marketing and dealing with more Western publishing houses. And so Masobe has a big push into their online presence with the idea to make it easier to get these Nigerian authors and books into people's hands. So they are the publishing house that originally published this book. But in Canada, the book was published by Groits Lounge Publishing. And Groits Lounge is currently based in Winnipeg, but it started out in Nigeria in 2012. It has moved around quite a bit from Nigeria to the UK to the US before landing in Winnipeg in 2020. And their aim is to diversify the Canadian book market with a clear focus on minority African Canadian writers of poetry, fiction, children's stories, and nonfiction. So their genres kind of range all over the place, but they do have quite a strong focus on African Canadian writers. I hadn't heard of Masobe or Groits Lounge Publishing before, but I think that I'll definitely be looking into both of them to kind of see which books and which authors we can get here in Canada. So the book that I chose is called Don't Answer When They Call Your Name by Ukamaka Olisakwe. And Olisakwe is originally from Nigeria and is currently living in, I believe, South Dakota. And so the book was written in English. It was not a translated work. And our book opens with a folktale, the story of Big Father and Mother, of their marriage and union, of how Mother wanted to have her own fields of yams to plant and harvest. She had come from a line of successful farmers, and as her father's first child, even though she was a girl, he let her farm the fields and even keep the money that she had earned through the harvest. Mother knew that if she had her own fields of yams now, they too would prosper. But Big Father refused, believing that the farming of fields, especially yams, was a man's work and not a woman's. Mother should be giving him children. That was her job. However, Mother was only 19, and she knew that she was not ready to be a mother. And Mother was stubborn, and so she refuses to bear him children, and he refused to give her a field. Now, Mother may be stubborn, but she was also smart. And eventually, Mother was able to convince Big Father of a deal. She would bear him 4 children, 4 sons, and once the last was born, he would give her her field. He agrees. However, after the last of the children are born, Big Father still refused, saying that Mother needs to be a proper mother to her children, and if she is farming, she won't be able to do that. So once the children aren't quite so young, then he will give her a field. It goes on like this for years until her youngest child is 10 years old, and Mother finally comes to terms with the fact that she is never going to get her field. Father has now told her that once all of her sons are grown, then she can have her field of yams. She finally recognizes Father's lies for what they are and is furious with him for deceiving her. So the day after her son's 10th birthday, Mother goes and stands in the middle of Father's fields and calls forth a mighty power from the sky, a falling asteroid which she pulls from its path down to Earth to destroy all of Father's fields and his livelihood. It is devastation, and Big Father is beyond furious. So in retribution, he strikes Mother down with a machete and vows to punish her children for generations to come. Hundreds of years later, the people are still trying to atone for Mother's original sin. Every 10 years, Big Father will dry up their water supply and demand the sacrifice of an Aja, a child, before they will be returned to the village. The Ajas must venture alone into the forest of iniquity to show their people's commitment to Big Father. And they don't generally come back. Adan, or Ada, was too young to really remember the last Aja. However, at 13, she knows enough now to fear and dread the time coming during her childhood. But when her and her dog Obi go to fetch water one morning and find that the river is completely dried up, she knows that the time has come. Running back to her village, she warns her mother, who locks Ada in the house and tells her not to leave for any reason. Now, Ada knows what is at stake. Her mother can't face another loss. She's already lost Ada's infant brother, and more recently, without warning, her father too. If she loses Ada too, she won't be able to go on. So, Ada vows to stay exactly where she is. Now, from her view in the bedroom, she can see and hear out the small opening of the window. She can hear the priestess speaking, telling the parents of the village that it is their child's duty to atone for Big Mother's sin. She almost misses Obi sneaking closer to the window. She almost misses him jumping out of it. She's not really sure why she follows. She knows she has to stay in the room. And when the priestess's eyes fall on her, she knows that she's made a horrible, horrible mistake. No amount of begging will change the priestess's mind. And so, with her mother wailing at her back, Ada and Obi head off into the forest. Ada's journey takes her through dark jungles and forests where she is chased by terrifying creatures and eventually brought to a world like she's never seen before. There, she meets someone she never thought possible, Mother herself. Here, Ada starts to see the bigger picture surrounding the sacrifices that Big Father keeps demanding and learns what has become of the many children who have been sent off into the forest alone. Mother, who is powerful and cruel, promises to help Ada reach her destination, but only if Ada helps her in return. Ada must sneak into the realm of the dead and steal Father's machete, which is protected by the spirits there. This is the very machete that was used to cut down Mother, and once Mother has it again, she will be more powerful than ever before. Reluctantly, but with really no other choices, Ada agrees and ventures into the realm of the dead, where she begins to learn that there is much more to the folk tales and the histories that she has been told all her life. She begins to realize that the things and people are not what she has been told, and that her original mission to appease Big Father may not be what is actually best for her and her people in the end. Ukamaka Olisakwe uses African folktale to give a demonstration of how women are so often demonized, especially in the breakdown of a relationship, when their actions and assertions of their own basic rights are often seen as being the cause of the breakdown. It is a comment on the patriarchy and the control which men have over so many lives. The story itself is fairly simple. It is written for a young YA audience, but I think that the themes and the symbolism can speak to readers of any age. I enjoyed this story. I really liked Ada as a protagonist. She's thrown into kind of an entirely unfair situation, which she had no hand in creating. And she does her best to navigate this while also carrying this huge burden of saving her people. In the end, Ada holds much more power than she or anyone realizes, which I think is a very powerful message for young people to be reading. It's a short read, definitely a short read. It's just under 150 pages. So I think all of us would say that it is a very short read. So if you're looking for something, if you like folk tales, but want to kind of look into a folk tale that's not based in Western mythologies, this would be a really good one. I quite enjoy folk tales and mythology. I'm not familiar with these ones though, so it was interesting to kind of read a different culture's folk tales and kind of get to delve into that a little bit. I think that if you're looking for a quick read that's quite action-packed, it moves along quite quickly. Ada kind of goes from one place to the next, to the next, to the next, and she's kind of having to make these decisions very, very fast. And that is evident in the writing style. You kind of move along quite quickly with her. She's a very likable protagonist. I think that you root for her the whole time, not just because she's kind of in this situation that she had no hand in getting involved in. She's definitely seen as the one who is the most unfair for her to have to kind of deal with this. I think apart from that, she's also just a very likable protagonist. She wants to help people. She wants to help her people. She wants to help, honestly, Mother. She wants to help kind of these people that she's trying to steal this machete from. She also wants to help them. And so she comes off as a very likable person, likable protagonist, and you find yourself rooting for her the whole time. So if all of that sounds like it's something that you might be interested in, then I definitely recommend Don't Answer When They Call Your Name by Ukamaka Olisakwe. It is not available in our collection, but you can interlibrary loan it. I double-checked that. I got it from VPL, but there are a handful of libraries in the Lower Mainland that do have it. So you can always use the interlibrary loans to bring it here for you.
Well, thank you, Sadie, for introducing us to a very special publisher that really specializes in something very important. So thank you for that. And last but not least, we're going to go over to Corinne. Which publisher did you choose for today?
Yes, so I chose Restless Books. Their tagline is an international publisher for a world in motion. And according to their website, they began in 2013 as kind of like a digital publisher of international literature. And again, I quote, in response to the parochial, inward-looking, and homogenizing trends in American publishing, which I think pretty much that's their thesis statement right there. And they have kind of stuck to it. They are founded by 3 people. And in 2014, they started moving into print editions. They have published books originating from Cuba, Hungary, Iceland, Nigeria, Chile, Mexico, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Iran, Madagascar, many, 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 many places. And in fact, they have been the English publisher for 33 authors, this being their first time being published in English, as well as publishing the first novel from Madagascar in English. And they are really there to kind of promote international literature. They are a strong advocate for internationalism, diversity, immigrant culture. They set up in 2015 the Restless Book Prize for New Immigrant Writings to help support financially writers in that field. And they have really been kind of pushing their mission and also just not publishing, but supporting authors through their missions. And in 2013, they moved to Amherst. So that's nice. Sounds like a great place. So the book that I have chosen was published in 2024. It is Counsel Culture by Kim Hye-jin, and it is translated from the Korean by Jamie Chang. If that translator's name is familiar to you, it is probably because she translated perhaps one of the most famous books, which is Kim Ji-young, Born 1912 by Namju Cho, and she is the same translator of this particular book. Kim Hye-jin wrote the very famous book. Her other book published in English was Concerning My Daughter, which was also very, very good. This one, I loved it. I finished it last night. And so I'm just trying to gather my thoughts. Our main character is Hae-so. She is a middle-aged woman. And at night, she walks the streets. She doesn't go out during the day anymore. She can't risk running into someone that knows her and recognizes her. And at this point, almost everyone does. Her face is known to most people, and she's not sure when they start talking to her whether they are an enemy or not. In addition to walking the streets, her days are mostly filled with writing letters that she never sends. She writes unfinished letters to her husband, now ex-husband, who has drifted apart from her. She writes letters to her ex-best friend that she pushed away. She writes angry letters to the director of the counseling center that she helped found that has unjustly fired her. And she writes accusing letters to her old coworker who wronged her. And she also writes not apology letters, but explanation letters. She's trying to explain why she did what she did and why she said what she said. Now, Hae-so was a successful therapist. For 10 years, she worked in a counseling center that she helped found, helping different patients with their problems. And she was so successful that she was eventually asked to be a therapist consultant on TV. She weighed in about this or that, and often she was too busy to kind of read the scripted comments that she was given. And so one day when she's about to go onto TV to kind of weigh in as a therapist about the bad behavior of an actor, she doesn't really think before she joins the voices in condemning him. His actions were cruel. His actions were thoughtless. How could he treat people like that? However, later when this actor commits suicide, the finger of blame gets pointed at her. Online articles and comments, truths and half-truths and lies are all aimed towards her, but not just her husband, and her workplace. The counseling center is flooded with phone calls and emails demanding her resignation. Articles are written by journalists about how she is the villain in this entire piece. In fact, it gets so bad that she can't leave the house for people stopping her and giving her a piece of their mind. In fact, her favorite restaurant asks her not to come anymore because if they know that this is the restaurant that she frequents, they'll lose business. Online hate is piled and piled and piled on her until she finally breaks. It feels unfair. People are asking her to apologize, demanding her apologize, but she can't. She can't figure out how to fix this, and she can't accept that really she did anything so wrong. And so at night, she wanders the streets, aimless, until she runs into, say, a 10-year-old girl who is feeding stray cats. And as she watches them, she kind of latches on to one particular stray cat named Turnip. Mangy and abused, he has a broken paw, and she's drawn to help this helpless creature, to save him from the harsh life on the streets, to save him from the cruelty of other humans. But this cat is injured and wary and has been horribly abused and refuses to accept her help. Jesus decides to rescue the cat and, in a way, rescues herself. So this, again, I would argue, is a short book, clocking in at 200 pages. It really tackles the issue of kind of being canceled. So the idea of being the target of all this online hatred of strangers, and that it's so intense and the focus and scrutiny is so much that it makes day-to-day living impossible. There's a section in it when she's, at the vet and someone starts talking at her and her anxiety builds and builds because she can't tell if this person is an enemy or not. And this really reminded me of a story from Tableau, who is one of the founders of the band Epic High. And he was the focus of a vicious online campaign saying that he had lied about his time being at a prestigious American university. And it got so bad to the point that when he went to the hospital with his wife for the birth of their first child, he was so panicked at the hospital, looking at the faces of the doctors and the nurses and the other patients, because he couldn't tell. Maybe one of them had said one of those horrible things, and maybe one of them really hated him for something that he hadn't done. And so that kind of basic faith in humanity and the kindness of others is so shaken and disjointed that you can never get it back. This is really talking about that court of public opinion that can absolutely destroy people. There are no second chances. A small mistake, if you are some scapegoat for something, becomes absolutely impossible to recover from. There's a lot of stories in both North America and in Korea as well of this kind of cyberbullying, or the idea of kind of like online hate directed at one person. We see all the time on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, or any other bit of social media. We cotton on to this one person that we have collectively decided is at fault, and we want to punish them. There's no redemption possible. There's no second chances. They just need to be punished. And so our main character has a real problem both accepting that she is the victim of this and accepting that maybe she made a mistake. She's constantly fighting against what she can do. Why does she need to apologize? Should she apologize? Can she really fix anything? She's kind of in this weird twilight zone of not being able to move on with her life and having to accept that her old life is absolutely over. It is a book, and in a couple of interviews, the author said that she wanted to look at kind of like a tragic event that we experience directly and indirectly. Indirectly, our protagonist is a part of that actor's story, whether she wanted to be or not. And directly, she is part of the tragic events of the cancellation of her entire life. At its heart, though, it is a very gentle story. The bit about the cat rescues, and I'm not a cat person, it touched me. The poor little turnip. And also Jesus' relationship with Sei, who's like a 10-year-old girl who's bullied by her classmates. She's a little bigger. She's playing in a dodgeball tournament and she's constantly getting picked on. And so Jesus starts to see herself in these underdogs, in the stray cats that are kind of dismissed by society or outright hated just for being cats. She sees herself in this 10-year-old child that is bullied just because she's a little different from all the other kids. And so she starts to make these kind of like human and I guess inhuman connections. And that is kind of what helps her rise above it, or at least move on to a new phase of her life. Yeah, it's a real shame that I didn't read this in 2024 because it would be my favorite book of the year, which is a real bummer, but it's fine. It's fine. That's okay. But yeah, if you're looking for something that is just wonderfully written, very contemplative, very melancholy, looking at a very particular issue, I think in a really nuanced and wonderful way, you should absolutely pick up this job. Counsel Culture, published in 2024. Would that it were 2025, by the fantastic publisher Restless.
Well, you can blame the vendor for not sending that to us earlier because we just got it, right? Like a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So thank you for talking about Restless Books. I think another really, really great publisher of books in translation. So thank you for that. So thank you everybody for doing this small press episode. There's always things throughout the year that we are especially partial to. And so this is one of mine. So thank you for doing that. And I'm glad to hear so many great choices. And I know sometimes we talk about, our Keep It Fictional episodes where we, have to find books, but like a lot of surprises do come. And, sometimes we get into those areas that we didn't know exist. And so it's great to have, exposure to all of that. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great week reading, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please tell a fellow book lover about it. You can find a list of all the books we discussed in our show notes. Join us next week for another fun book chat. Until then, keep it fictional.